hope you enjoyed that. That was just, I think, brilliant from Dr. Lee. It's gone viral. You may have already seen it, but we thought we'd give you something to look at while we were waiting for people to pop in. It's just 2 minutes after 7, but I'm going to start by just saying thank you, Winkley PTA. Thank you so much for making this happen. In these times, we need to be very calmed, and so I myself had a great and adventurous day, but at the end of it, I'm looking forward to just learning from you and being calmed down. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Nasapak, our PTA Communications VP, and she will introduce our amazing panelists.
Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited tonight. We have 3 amazing speakers, and they are going to be sprinkling some magic dust on us. That is the goal. I hope that we all walk away feeling recharged. I know that this school year, it's starting so differently, and you know, life has just been turned upside down and inside out. So we plan to walk away here charged and ready to navigate virtual schooling starting next Thursday and leading into whatever your choices that you've made, whether that's in person or hybrid or virtual. So without further ado, our first speaker tonight is Mrs. Ruth Song. She is a fellow parent at Winkley Elementary. She is also a parenting coach and really works with parents that are struggling with tough times and giving them guidance on helping their kids get through it. She is the founder of mybraveguide.com, and if you get a chance to check out her website, you will find a wealth of information of parenting tools. There's activities for kids, and lots of really great advice. So tonight, Ruth is going to be providing us some parenting tools to help us get through virtual learning.
All right, well, give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen here.
One second, Ruth, before you start, I forgot to mention, if you have any questions throughout the presentations, if you can just drop them into the chat or the Q&A and make sure that it's sent over to the panelists. And at the end of all 3 sessions, we will come back and do a Q&A for our presenters. Thank you.
All right, so first of all, thanks you guys so much for letting me come and speak, and I am so grateful to be here tonight, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with you all some tips and ideas on how to help your kids and also yourself recognize, talk about, and manage the emotions during hard times and uncertain times like what we're all going through right now. So before I start, let me just introduce myself in case we've never met before. Like Laura said, my name is Ruth Song. I founded Brave Guide, which is a parenting website and blog which deals with big emotions and behaviors for kids. And I provide practical resources for parents and for adults who work with children in the form of workbooks and printable PDFs and things like that. So after getting my master's of counseling, I became a family preservation therapist back when we were living in Seattle, and got certified as a parent-child interaction therapist. So that's kind of my background and my history. These days, I have gone on to have a couple of kiddos of my own. Caleb, who's 11 and going into middle school this year, and Daniel, who is 8 and going into 3rd grade here at Winkley. So also, in addition to that, I have gotten to be a foster mom to almost 15 kiddos over the years. So that's been really amazing and awesome, and giving me lots of real life experience figuring out how to handle emotions with these kiddos. So before I jump in and share with you the tips that I want to share with you tonight and the tools, I wanted to tell you just a really quick story about one of the most uncertain times that me and my family has ever gone through, and kind of how it came about that I came up with these lessons. So just over 2 years ago, my husband and I decided to relocate here from Seattle because of his job. And this move was super tough on all of us, but it was especially hard on my oldest, Caleb, who, you know, was old enough to be already connected in with his school and friends and a really amazing sports team. And as we were working through all of that upheaval and all of the emotions that came with having to start at this new school and make new friends and find new teams and all of that, I ended up getting diagnosed with breast cancer. And as you can imagine, hearing that diagnosis was just like knock us over hard. We were far away from our family and our friends, and we were just 2 weeks into starting a brand new school and trying desperately to find some stability to stand on. And one of the things that was so hard about that time was that there was just so many questions, and any answers that we got were always given with lots of exceptions and almost with like more questions that would come with them. And all of that uncertainty brought up obviously so many big emotions for me, for my husband, and for my kids. And watching my family, and especially my boys, go through that was such a challenge. It was really one of the more difficult parts of the whole thing, was just trying to figure out how to help them process everything when I felt like I was drowning myself and just didn't have the stable ground to help them from. And with this, it felt really hard to understand even like who they were almost anymore. My oldest, Caleb, if you know him now, you'll know he's like this now, but he had always been such a smiley, laughy, happy kid. And through that time, he just became so withdrawn and angry, and he would get mad at just the simplest things and yell and scream. And I should say, I did get his permission to share this with you, just so you know. That is important. But watching him go through that just made me as his mom feel desperate to help him. And you would think that with all of that background and training I had and, you know, parent-child interaction and everything, that I should be natural at being able to help my kids through that. But the reality was that I just felt so underwater myself that I wasn't even able to think straight to figure out what to do. And thankfully, we made it through those times. We were surrounded by all of you, this amazing, incredible community, our neighbors, and have some lifelong friends from that, and are so grateful for that. And thankfully, too, I'm cancer-free, past that part, hopefully for good. But as we have been going through the last few months, I feel like so much of what's being brought up by all of this uncertainty around the coronavirus really reminds me a lot of the time that we went through as a family. And there's all these big emotions and the fear and the stress that I'm seeing, and just sort of this overwhelming sense of everybody trying to find some sort of solid ground, some sort of answers to stand on. And, you know, I see it for my kids, I see it for myself, I see it for, you know, all of my friends as we're desperately asking, what are you going to do? Are you guys going back in person? Are you doing hybrid? Are you going to go virtual? And there's all these big questions. And so with that, I wanted to share with you guys the 3 lessons that I learned from my experience a couple of years ago, and how I figured out how to help my kids through those tough times. And with that, keeping in mind that a lot of us are also struggling as their parents right now, and needing to find ways to help them when we're maybe not as stable as we normally are either. So with that, let's go into lesson 1. So the first lesson that I learned and that I help my kids with is that emotions are okay. There's no bad emotions. So it is not bad or wrong to be angry, afraid, any of that. So on the surface, that might seem pretty obvious, but I think when you're in the middle of really hard times, it can be really easy to start addressing our kids' emotions with some really like unhealthy and unhelpful ways. And so some of the different ways that we might find ourselves interacting with our kids when they're feeling emotional or having big behaviors because of their emotions these days would be things like, maybe getting really frustrated with them. We may try to shame them over their emotions or into behaving better. We might try to coerce them into thinking or feeling something that they don't feel. We might try to reason or logic with them. I know that's one of my favorites that doesn't work very well, but is there. Also, maybe like an elaborate rewards or punishment system for our kids to try to get them to do what we need them to do and stop being so angry or whatever it is. And again, it can be really easy to slip into these responses. And so I want you to know, if you see that and you're like, oh, yeah, that's me, there's no shame in that at all. It's, part of being a parent is learning this, right? But in reality, if we can, when we see our kids acting out, like for example, they're coming to us and whining and frustrated and angry about having to do Zoom calls because they hate Zoom calls. And we may initially react with, oh, you just need to do this. Nobody wants to do this, but you need to do it. But in reality, when they're expressing that to you, they might not be expressing it in the best way possible, but what they're trying to tell you is that things are not okay for them right now. So the question becomes, how can we validate and allow all of those emotions without, with addressing, I guess, the behaviors that come with it? Because obviously we can't allow, our kids to just not do their Zoom calls or something, but we do need to find a way to allow the emotion of not liking something or not wanting something or being disappointed. So there's lots of different ways to do this, and one of my really favorite ways to do this is to approach big emotional statements or even really big behaviors like a big tantrum or something with curiosity. So for example, if your child is complaining about having to do their work at home, instead of yelling or trying to shut down those feelings, you could try allowing it with curiosity questions. And some examples would be things like, why aren't you wanting to do your schoolwork right now? And not in a shameful way, but just in a really curious way. You're asking that. Maybe asking them what feels hard about being home right now and talking about that. Or this one is actually like my favorite secret parenting tool that works so well, is to say, honey, do you need me to step in right now and help? Or are you just needing to vent and get this frustration off your chest? And it's so crazy. I've found that the big negative behaviors that my kids will have that often accompany really big emotions start to disappear when I make room for their emotions by being curious. And so that is one way you can allow emotions. Another way would be to approach the big emotions by teaching them acceptable ways that are okay in your home to express emotions, to express wants, to express needs. So when kids learn appropriate methods of communicating their emotions, they start to see that they get positive attention instead of all of that attention they've been getting from their negative behavior. So the more that you can teach them and reward that positive expressing of emotions, the more likely they are to turn to doing that versus turning to whining or throwing a tantrum or crying or things like that. So one way that I use with my kiddos that's been really helpful, especially for a lot of the foster kiddos that we work with who really have often a big deficit in being able to express emotions, is to use this statement, which is, I feel because, and I want or I need. So you have them fill that in with, for example, I feel really angry because I have to do a Zoom call and I hate Zoom. Right now, I need a little bit of a break and then I'll come back and do my work. So that statement you can write down on a paper, maybe put it up. I have it down by our fridge right now, and so that I can even pull it out and ask them to tell me what they're feeling with that. And it really helps give them an appropriate structure to express those emotions going on. So I think it's going to be really important to allow a lot of room for emotion in our homes over the coming weeks. It's just bound, all of this newness is bound to bring it up. So one other thing before we move on to lesson 2 that I want to say is that I know that there are some kids who are way more expressive than others about what they're feeling. And if you have a kiddo who isn't very expressive, there's 2 things that I think are really important. One is that please never assume that just because they're not expressing emotions doesn't mean that they don't have them. And the other thing is that it's so important that you stay curious and leave ample amount of room for them to express emotions whenever they're able to. So if you have one of those kids, just keep that in the back of your mind, that you may need to spend a little extra time, a little extra curiosity time with them. Okay, so on to lesson 2, which is that sometimes the one emotion that you're seeing, the big emotion, might just be the tip of the iceberg. And this was really one of the most important lessons that I had to constantly remind myself about as I helped my son process all of that anger he was having while we were going through all of my cancer treatment and moving and settling and everything. So he was showing me so much anger, and his words and his behaviors were demanding that I see that he was angry. And in reality, while he was really angry, and totally rightfully so, there was also so many other emotions going on under the surface. So one thing that I've thought a lot about since that time is what's a way to help as my kid's mom work with them to figure out what else they're feeling. Because oftentimes if you just say, what are you feeling? They don't necessarily know. So one tool that I think is really, really helpful is the iceberg method. And so you can actually draw this out on a sheet of paper. Up at the very top of the iceberg above the waterline is you're gonna write down what emotion are you actually seeing from your kids. So, maybe it's anger. And so you'd write that down. And then under the waterline, you're gonna have them list what other kinds of thoughts, what other feelings are they having about whatever situation you're talking about. So you could do this, for example, by asking them, how are you feeling about going back to school virtually for the first few weeks this year? So then you might get a whole bunch of other things. And so I listed some there for you, lots of different ideas. As a parent, I think it can be really eye-opening to use a tool like this with your kiddos and hear what all they're thinking and feeling. And I think once we know what they're struggling with a little bit better, it helps us to actually help them. Because if we're just addressing all of that anger that they're showing, but underneath they're maybe feeling a lot of grief and sadness and fear, then demanding that they stop yelling or throwing tantrums or other angry behaviors, it's just not going to work necessarily. And in fact, oftentimes, if you're really only addressing that top of the iceberg emotion, their behaviors might actually increase because they're not feeling heard and seen, because you're not addressing all of what's going on, even though they haven't necessarily been able to share all of that. So this iceberg tool, I think, is a good, sometimes just having a visual tool like that to use with your kids can help them sort of frame their thoughts and be able to put it down with you more than just talking about it can. So as a parent, our goal is to figure out what's going on for our kids underneath those big negative behaviors and help them address all of those emotions so that they're able to calm their behaviors and do what they need to do. And that leads us right into lesson 3, which is that using coping skills with kids to help manage their emotions and behaviors is one of the best ways that I know how to help them address all of the emotions. So you might be wondering when I say that, what are coping skills? And here's my definition. So coping skills are activities, actions, and exercises that help regulate or calm down your emotions and your behaviors. And so that would be as opposed to maybe repressing all of your emotions and behaviors. We want to learn to calm them down so that we can choose how we behave. So let's talk about how we get our kids to actually learn to use coping skills, because I think as I do this with my kids, that becomes one of the bigger questions, is how do I teach this? So I think that there's 3 steps that you can use to teach coping skills, and I'll tell you those, and then I'll actually teach you all a few coping skills that you can use with your kids. And then I have some other resources as well that you can download around coping skills. So step 1 is that you want to first of all introduce the skill to your kiddos, and when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you choose a good time when they're calm, they're not tired, they're not hungry, they're not distracted and playing video games or something, and then tell them why you want to teach the skill, but remembering to leave out, you know, any shame or judgment. So it could be like, honey, I've noticed you've been really angry lately, and it's been really hard to get through your schoolwork because you're so angry. And so I have something I want to teach you that might be able to help you get through it so it's not so hard for you. So something like that. And then you're going to explain whichever coping skill you're going to teach them in the steps. And then step 2 is that you want to practice the skill together. And this step I think is really important for 2 different reasons. One is that practicing together makes it so that you are basically modeling that behavior for your kids, and kiddos learn best, I think, through us as parents modeling the behaviors that they want to see. They're like parents, you know, they do and say the things that we want, that we say, whether we want them to or not. So if you're able to do it with them and model that, you know, maybe doing deep breathing, for example, is totally normal, it's helpful, it's good, then they're able to see that and frame it that way for themselves. And then the other thing about practicing together is that coping skills are a skill, and just like anything, it takes practice to learn it, to make it really ingrained inside of you so that you pull it up and use it when things get hard. So that's step 2. And then finally, step 3 is that you're going to move on to encouraging your child to actually use those skills when they need it. So it's important to note, though, with that if your child has tipped over into like really big behavior, like maybe they've been angry and now they're actually throwing a full-blown tantrum, in that moment, asking them to use their coping skills and try deep breathing probably isn't going to work. So in that case, what I would do and what I do with my kiddos is that I encourage it through modeling it to them. So I will do something like, honey, I can see that you are so angry right now as you're yelling at me and you're rolling around on the floor, and I'm starting to feel pretty frustrated too. So I'm going to take a few minutes to calm down so that I don't yell at you, because I don't want to do that. And I'm going to do some deep breathing. And when you've chosen to calm down and you're ready to talk with me without yelling, then we can continue. You're welcome to do this breathing with me, or come back to me when you're ready to talk calmly. And then I'll actually do those deep breathing or whatever coping skill I told them I was going to do right there, so they can see me using it in the moment, calming myself down. And it helps to model. It also does help to keep me calm, because those moments can be so frustrating with our kids. So let's move on to some actual coping skills that you can use with your kids. And these are my top 3 favorites that I use with my boys that they really like. So the first one is hot cocoa breathing. And this one is just fun. It's easy to remember. You pretend like you're holding a cup of hot cocoa in your hand. You're gonna sniff in through your nose, pretending that you're smelling yummy, delicious hot cocoa. And then you're gonna blow out through your mouth, pretending that you're cooling off the hot cocoa. So, and then you do that. Usually if we're practicing, we'll practice at least 10 times together. So that's coping skill 1. Coping skill 2 is the 5 senses scavenger hunt. And this one I love because it's fun, and my kids don't even always realize that we're using a coping skill. And it works really well, I think, on the go. So I use this one a lot in doctor's offices. One of my kiddos has a big fear of getting shots, and even when we're not there to get shots, he's just really worked up. So we'll do a lot of this there. So how you do it is you ask your kiddo to look around and name 5 things that they can see, and then look around and name 4 different things that they can touch, 3 things that they can hear, 2 things that they can smell, 1 thing that they can taste. And then you can repeat it again if you need to, although usually that time that it takes to do that is enough that my kids generally start to calm down by that point and are being a little bit more in their sort of rational brains versus those big emotions controlling their behaviors. So then the last one I wanted to share with you is body movement. And there's two different ways that I use this at home. So the first is just exercise or moving your body. And as adults, I think we often just naturally do this. We'll be frustrated and we decide to go out for a walk and blow off some steam, or go for a run and clear our heads. And kids actually need that too. So there's times where they're just maybe feeling frustrated and they need to be able to just go out and work out some of that energy. And so I'll send them out to jump on the trampoline, to run up and down the stairs 10 times, to do 10 jumping jacks. It really doesn't matter what, just get off some of that energy. And then the other way that we use it is doing things that bring your brain down below the level of your heart. So like, for example, the downward dog yoga pose is really good for this. And what that does is it helps bring the blood flow back up to your brain. So when you're having a big emotional response, a lot of the blood will start leaving your brain and your brain sort of isn't functioning at its highest capacity. So doing a movement like that that can help the blood flow go back to the brain can help your body calm down much quicker than if you weren't doing it. So those are three that I really like. I also wanted to give all of you, if you would like it, a free printable calm down card deck. And this is one that I use at home. So there's a link on the screen here. And you can go to that, it'll pull it right up, and you can just hit print and print these out and give them, you know, put them on your kids' school desks or wherever. We have a calm down kit at home that I have mine in. I also have one in the car. So hopefully those will be helpful. I think those three that I just talked about with you are in that calm down deck as well. So you'll have those instructions again. And then obviously a few others are in there too. And then just one last thing before I wrap up that I wanted to mention is that I do have a lot of other free resources on my website that I would love for you to make use of if you need or want them. So if you just go to mybraveguide.com, up in the very top, there's a place where you can enter your email to get the password to the parenting resource library, and you can go in and print off all kinds of different calm down tools and coping skills tools and all sorts of different things. So that's all that I have for you. I hope that those three lessons of figuring out how to help our kids manage and express and control their behaviors and emotions was helpful to you. And thank you so much for your time. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ruth. I know that the 5 senses scavenger hunt sounds like a lot of fun. It probably take a little bit of practice to get used to it. I could see where that would be really helpful in just kind of bringing the focus back outside of those emotions. Mm-hmm. So our next speaker this evening is Miss Terri Hinojosa. She is our school counselor as well as a certified life and art therapy coach. Terri is super passionate about mindfulness, and if you were at Winkley this past year, we've spent a lot of time at our school focusing on mindfulness training, and that I imagine is going to continue with big focus this year. So tonight, Terri is actually going to be coaching us on how to mindfully balance emotions and create positive daily habits. So I would expect that's going to be very beneficial to not only our students, but ourselves as well. So thank you, Terri.
Thank you. And I'm so honored to be here and that you asked me to participate. And Ruth, you are amazing. And your kids are so resilient. They're so lucky to have you as a parent, for sure. I just learned a lot from you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as you were talking, I realized I didn't have a picture of my family. So I did that while you were talking to be able to share tonight. So let me share this. Okay, can you see that? All right. Okay, so like Laura said, tonight I'm going to be talking about mindfulness and a little bit about the brain and just a little bit about me. This is one of my biggest passions. It's really what led me to counseling. This is, first of all, this is my family. I have twin girls that are 19, and then my son is 14 at Canyon Ridge, and my husband, Jojo. Years ago, I went through a health journey similar to Ruth's, and that's when I started all of my mindfulness practices, and it really got me through. And it's really such a simple idea and simple practices that you know, I was 42 learning these things. So imagine, you know, fast forward, now I get to come to a school and I get to teach very young kids these practices. So we're really building this future of empowered learners who are going to be more self-aware of their emotions, and their emotional intelligence will be so much higher when they're going out into the world and getting a job, for sure. So tonight I'm going to talk about some coping skills, and then I'm going to also talk about how you can create some positive daily habits. So let's go ahead and let's look at the brain. So something to know, this is a lesson that I teach all of our kids. I don't know if they've come home, you know, when you ask them, what did you learn today? Hopefully they don't say nothing. And they say, well, Ms. Hinojosa taught us about the brain and our emotions. We were very lucky to partner with Unscripted Heart this past year. They are based here in Austin. And when we started out teaching the teachers and teaching our kiddos and our leadership groups, we always start with the brain because we want them to understand the importance of why we need these mindfulness practices. So I'm going to kind of combine a little bit of Dr. Dan Siegel's idea of flipping the lid and some of the words that Unscripted Heart use, which are kind of fun to help kids remember the 3 different parts that we're going to focus on tonight. So first of all, the amygdala, or we like to call the dragon because it's our protector, is our emotion center. So whenever we are in a fight, flight, or freeze mode of perceived danger, the amygdala is the one that quickly determines what we do. Sometimes though, kiddos and even adults get stuck in that emotion center and it kind of takes over. So when we talk about flipping our lid, I'll explain that and how sometimes we react without thinking because our cortex isn't really communicating with our amygdala. So the second area is the hippocampus, or the seahorse, and that's where memories are stored. And later when I talk about creating those positive daily habits, you're going to understand why that's so important, because we want to store positive thoughts and images in our hippocampus, because I don't know the exact number, but I think I've heard like 80% of our thoughts daily are negative. Very self-defeating, and it's something we have to practice daily to get in that mindset. And if you can imagine right now, I mean, you can't imagine your parents, there's so much negativity right now. In fact, earlier I was watching the news, and I don't know why I did that before this webinar, because my heart started racing just watching the numbers and, you know, people getting upset. And without even thinking, I started doing deep breathing. So that's years of practice where I don't have to stop and think, what do I do? What do I do? I feel this. My body just knew, let's go ahead and start breathing, because I practice it all the time. And then the third area, the prefrontal cortex, is our thinking part of our brain. So when we talk about flipping our lid, and I don't know if your kiddos have come home and shown you this motion, but they will show their teachers, right now I'm flipping my lid without saying it, and that means I need to take a walk, or I need to take a break. And that's really where we want them to be, that they're aware of what's going on. So flipping your lid, if you look at your hand, the thumb is the amygdala, the emotion center, and the fingers fold over as your cortex. So this is a very healthy, you know, calm brain. So as soon as, let's pick the emotion anger, as soon as somebody's angry, you flipped your lid, and no longer is your cortex, your thinking part of your brain, communicating with your amygdala. So mindfulness practices help bring that cortex back in line so that you can make rational decisions. Your brain can kind of step out of that, this is a real perceived danger, because sometimes, like I said, we can get stuck in that thought process. And in a little bit, we'll talk about anxiety and how we get stuck and how we can get out of it. So that is flipping your lid. So let's go ahead and move on to why mindfulness, my favorite topic. So before I even talk about that, let me just say how powerful it was this past year to see so many kids take charge of this practice. And I'll talk to you a little bit about exactly what the brain train is that we were doing in classes. But after kiddos doing it 2 to 3 times a day, day in and day out with their teachers, they all reported that they felt like they could focus more, that they could think before they spoke. A lot of the 4th and 5th graders, I had at least 50 kids in our leadership program who, by the end of that time, they felt so confident. So there were so many magical things that came out of this past year, and I think it was perfect timing, especially with this pandemic looming that we didn't know about, that this was another way for our kids to become leaders. And they were teaching other kids, and they were teaching teachers. And I even saw kids that were more comfortable with the brain train practice than some adults, which I think is pretty cool. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is not hokey. It's not anything strange. It's just simply bringing one's attention to the present moment without judgment. So why do we need it though? So like I talked to you about the brain and the emotions and how sometimes we can let our amygdala take over, or dragon. It increases positive emotions. It reduces stress because, as you know, when you have stress in your body, and not all stress is bad, we have good stress and we have bad stress. But when our cortisol and adrenaline raises, that's when we have to find those coping tools to kind of bring us back down and calm ourselves so we can maybe think before we speak or make, good decisions. So it also, like I said, it reduces stress. It empowers students to take charge of their emotions and become more self-aware, which will increase their academic success. So when you ask a young child, when you're angry, how does it feel in your body? It is the toughest question for them to answer. They cannot answer, well, my heart races. They'll always say, I'm mad. And the more we talk about it, the more we teach them these practices, or to just be in the moment of that feeling and to describe it, to name it, and we'll talk about a naming exercise in a minute, then they become more self-aware and more empowered to take care of their emotions, or to be in charge of that. And then it's, as we've seen through this pandemic, it just simplifies and slows down life. So, this past spring, we did a lot of mindfulness lessons for our virtual learning. And if you weren't able to watch those, I have them on the Winkley Counseling website. And if you're new to us, jumping on the website and just watching, I have a student showing mindful breathing. We had a podcast with Unscripted Heart, just kiddos talking about mindfulness, and some other tools on there. Okay, so let's talk about coping tools. And I loved Ruth's hot cocoa breathing. That was so cute. There's so many different ways to talk about breathing. You can do the 4 square breathing. You can use, this is something we use at Winkley. It's a breathing ball. It's just anything that is a visual for the kids to slow down their breathing. You can use bubbles, you can use pinwheels, so many fun things. But first, to understand, like, where is your child struggling? Is it emotionally, or are they stuck in their thought process? So there are different coping tools for those. And I'm going to skip that and come back, because I want to show you this checklist that I have. It's a great resource. It's based around anxiety. I'm not going into anxiety tonight, but it's really just a good checklist for where you struggle and what coping tools are good for what kind of worry you have. So let me run over to that. And I have all of these on the Winkley Counseling website, just on the whole presentation tonight, and all of these wonderful resources. So this is from a school counselor in LPC from Lake Conroe ISD, and it was a presentation I went to a couple years ago. I'm going to skip through this and just show you very quickly. There is a checklist that you can do with your child, and it asks you questions, and it really gives you an idea. Is my child struggling with their thought processes or their emotions? And you might know without even doing the checklist, but there's also a column for the parent. So you can kind of determine, what do I struggle with? What do you struggle with? Let's do some coping tools together, because as we know, connecting together is more powerful. Like Ruth even said, just modeling for our kids always. So let's go back. So since we're talking about the amygdala and the cortex, so coping tools for the big emotions would be like taking time alone, taking a walk, hugging a stuffed animal, petting a real animal. We know how therapeutic that is, right? Muscle progression, I want to stop and talk about that one. So if your child is, let's say, virtually learning and they're sitting in their chair, and all of a sudden they're just overwhelmed, they're upset, and their heart's racing, they can tell you, I can't get out of this feeling. You can have them grab the bottom of their chair, and you can have them push down really hard and then pull up and then relax their body. So that's kind of a type of muscle progression relaxation technique. I actually use it before I speak in front of crowds. So that works for me because I have the amygdala anxiety of speaking in front of people. Counting to 10, and what's really magical about that, which people think, well, yeah, counting to 10, what's that gonna do? What it's doing is it's engaging your cortex to think and bring it back online so that you have a calm mind. You can blow bubbles, you can draw. I really believe in the power of creativity, and when students get stuck in that negative thinking or worry, just giving them something to color or draw helps them express their emotions, and it just kind of gets you out of that place that you're stuck or your worry. I use it all the time too. I love just creating. It's freeing. And of course, fidgets. So fidgets could be just a simple pipe cleaner that you roll around your fingers, things like that. And then for cortex worry, or if they have lots of negative thoughts, which, by the way, good thing to not let them watch too much news with you. I'm sure y'all are aware of that by now, that sometimes they can't let go of that, and that might be something that they hold on to. Journaling is great for them. A worry box, and I love a worry box at school. There's something magical about it. When a child has a worry and they tuck it away, it's just that action of, I'm just going to go ahead and put this aside because I can move on. And I always tell the kiddos, that doesn't mean your worry is going to disappear, but for right now, let's just see if we can put it away and move on. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, okay, what should we talk about next? I love it. And you can just make that at home. You can even decorate one for the fall. Just get started with it and say, look, I know this is a hard time, but go ahead and write your worry on a note card and stick it in that box that we have over there, and then you can get right back to it. And then, of course, we have like Calm apps and Headspace apps. Those are amazing. So the next thing is brain train. Okay, so I know y'all are all on the edge of your seat because I keep talking about our mindfulness practices at school. And if you didn't watch the videos, or your kiddos haven't come home and shown you what that is, it's pretty amazing. It takes just a couple minutes, and it's something that the more you practice it, the more ingrained it is, and just easy to go to those simple techniques of getting yourself in a mindful body. So even when your kids are at home learning, make sure, learning is best when their spine is straight, because then they have a clear mind. So we say straight spine, clear mind. And then we have mindful breathing. So if you don't have a breathing ball like I showed you, you can just use your hands. And then mindful listening. How many times have you talked with even another adult and they struggle to give you their full attention? So mindful listening, will ring a bell, and we'll have the kiddos just listen into the bell and tell us what they hear while the bell is ringing, or just to focus in on the bell. And it's really helpful to kind of remove distractions around you and just get used to focusing in on that one thing. And then mantras. So a mantra might be, awareness begins with me, and they repeat it. So again, we're creating those positive neural connections in the brain. So we have those positive thoughts stored in the hippocampus, and more positive thoughts just means your day's going to go better, just means that you're more open to learn. So we have loved that practice. And like I said, it just takes a couple minutes. Okay, so I've talked a lot, I know. We're coming back down now to the positive daily habits. If you know me and you've seen me, you know how much I boast about gratitude journaling or having a gratitude jar. It's something I do with my family every day. We have a wall, and I don't even think we're going to erase this wall all through this time. We have put hundreds of things on the wall, and it's so sweet. But it really makes you kind of slow your mind and just focus in on little things. And you can be thankful for your shoes. You could be thankful for the sun. It doesn't have to be huge things. It's just getting your child to stop, think of something positive and not maybe something that's going wrong or something that they don't have. Let's focus on what we do have and what's going well. So starting your day with that, just naming 3 things at the breakfast table, or even at the end of your day at dinner, let's just go around and talk about what we're grateful for. All of our classes, we love to do that at school because the mindset is positive and it gets kids in a good mood, and then they're just open to learn. You saying and writing positive mantras to build self-esteem is incredibly powerful. There's something about thinking it and then taking a pencil and writing it out. There's more connection, but it's unbelievable how many self-defeating thoughts we have daily. And it breaks my heart when I see kids so young that already have these negative thoughts about themselves. And it's just getting them to focus in on, you know what, you are unique and you have gifts that we need, but we have to help them identify those. Visualization is one of my favorites. I was an athlete for many years. I went to UT for springboard diving scholarship, and it was really ingrained in us to visualize how we wanted our diving meet to go. So why not visualize how you want your day to go and visualize it in a good way, so you already start off with that positive mindset. Or if your child is in a really sad place, or they're struggling with their emotions, let's visualize your happy place. Where's your happy place? Let's go there. I do have some great little mantras and meditations and visualizations on my podcast if you follow that. And there's a great one that has a visualization about messages in a bottle. So you can visualize your positive messages coming to you, like coming towards you on the shore, and your negative messages moving out. And I've had students ask me, like in the middle of a meltdown, do the message in the bottle. And I just love it because it's really powerful. You can also get outside. I mean, we're in our houses all the time. Get outside, but do a mindful walk. Don't just get out and walk with your phone or talking with each other. Just get out and just say, let's observe 3 things, and let's really describe it. So that is a great mindful walk. And then, like I said earlier with the positive mantras, talking about their strengths. This is something I really advocate, talking to your child about what are your strengths. And they might not come up with them right away. It might take a couple days, but that's okay. Just have them keep going back to a poster, or make some, great art for their room with all their strengths that's unique to them, but put it up on the wall so that they can remind themselves daily of their worth and how unique they are, and how can we use your strengths in this situation, or how can we use your strengths in school. Also, let them spend time in their passion. And I know it's a little bit harder these days, but if they love sports, make sure every day they spend a little bit of time throwing that football or throwing the baseball. Or if they love art, just make sure that you schedule in that time in the next few weeks at least, that they get to spend a little time within that passion. And then, I'm going to jump down to the family schedule, because all that I'm talking about, you can schedule out for your kiddos. And I have one on my website, a daily schedule, where you can even list out, here's a menu of coping tools that you've told me work. So when you're feeling your emotion, go to that menu and let's pick something out and try it. And then make snack time a really special time or lunch. Just try and connect. And I know a lot of you parents are working from home, and this is a hard situation. But if there's 10 minutes that you can just take a break and sit with them and just connect, I think it would make a huge impact on them. So I just spoke a lot, but I hope if you have any questions, you reach out to me. I hope you go to the Winkley website. There's lots of great things. There's a great tool for naming your thoughts, naming hard things, but then reframing them into a positive way. So I hope this is not the last webinar. I think this is so cool that we get to partner with you guys, because this is where the magic lies, right? When we connect from school to home and we can partner together. So I hope we have more of these and can go even deeper.
Thank you, Mrs. Hinojosa. That was awesome. I know straight spine, clean mind is probably going to be something I say next week a few times. If you guys have any questions for Ruth or Terri, go ahead and put them into the chat panel, and we can ask those questions at the end. And without further ado, we are going to have our final speaker for the evening. This is Mr. Scott Abel. He is the Leadership and Innovation Manager for the Texas Health and Human Services. And he's the father. He has 2 amazing daughters, and he's going to be gearing up for virtual schooling just like us, because I believe he's still working from home. And with all of this, he's a public speaker. He focuses on leadership and communication, and he, works with a lot of adults, helping them to understand how to better communicate with one another. But I know in talking with him personally, he really makes us think about how we communicate with our kids too. So he's going to be talking to us about resilience tonight and how we can use our grit to get through these tough times. It's all you, Scott.
All right, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Winkley Elementary. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm definitely aware of the time and stuff, and I really appreciate the time that you've actually set aside to listen to the amazing speakers, to listen to both Ruth and Terri tonight. And so what I'll just say is that it'll be kind of like what Elizabeth Taylor told her 5th husband. I'm not going to keep you long, but it will be entertaining. So, so I appreciate that. And speaking of entertaining, though, one thing that probably has not been all that entertaining, at least from a fun perspective, has really kind of been the last 4.5 months. It's not, it has definitely been challenging. It's definitely been anxiety producing. As if parenting and work and just life in general weren't challenging or anxiety producing enough, we've had to deal with the last 4.5 months. Tonight I really want to talk to you about just some simple strategies, some things that you can do to actually help strengthen your grit and your resolve and your resilience as you go through the challenging times of school starting back up and being in a completely different learning environment and dealing with all the emotions and stuff that are going to come with that. So, as we talked about, there's all kinds of anxiety producing stuff usually that we're constantly dealing with in life. Whether it's you've got stuff at home, you've got a leak or some other, home repair incident, and your spouse or significant other who really believes that they are, Tim, the, tool man Taylor, that they can just kind of fix anything, and you really just don't want them to grab any tool and go anywhere near a home improvement project. Or you've got maybe some IT issues, whether it's at work or at home, the IT, the technical equipment stuff just won't work. And so that creates all kinds of frustrations for you. Or maybe you've had another argument, another spat with your significant other, or maybe even sometimes your ex, things of that nature. Or if you're like me, one of the things that causes you stress is if you run out of coffee. So that's definitely an anxiety producing incident for me. And so those are just the normal run-of-the-mill things that we're running, that we usually run into back before there was something called COVID-19. But now in the midst of all this, though, in the midst of what we've been dealing with over the last 4.5 months, now we've got a lot of other hits that are coming at us, and they seem to just not stop, right? And so one of the things that we're dealing with is work. So many of us, if you're like me, you're now having to switch your work environment, whereas before you were commuting and you were in the office, and now you're working at home. You set up shop either in your living room or in your dining room or the spare bedroom, and now that you can't really escape work, it's here. So whereas before you went to an office, you went to a location, and you got to actually decompress you got to actually have some physical separation between, you know, work and home. But now there's absolutely no separation. And so my commute now, whereas before it was about 40 minutes, now it's about 4 seconds. So I walk out of my bedroom, I come right down the hall to our dining room, and now I'm at work. When I walk out of the dining room, I'm immediately immersed back into the whirlwind of the house with a wife and 2 kids. And so there's no separation, there's no time to decompress. It's like I can't get away from either of those things. Another one is just, you know, the money and economic pressure. So if you or maybe your spouse or someone that you know in your family or someone you care about has been laid off or has lost their job or their job is in jeopardy because of all the economic constraints dealing with the coronavirus, that's definitely something that's weighing on you. Time is another issue. Time's another issue. It seems like we lose track of it now. All the days are running together. My wife and I are constantly asking each other when we get up in the morning, we're like, what day is today? What is this? Where is it still Tuesday? And so time has been almost compressed and almost, you know, flattened, and we don't even have a sense of what day it is because of all the different things that we're having to deal with. Family is another issue. You know, we're just trying to keep our kids safe and healthy. And we're hoping that, you know, somebody doesn't go out and spend too much time somewhere, or they touch the wrong thing and they bring it back inside the house. You know, you may have somebody in your family who definitely might be at risk because of, you know, some other health issue and stuff. And so that's made you even hyper vigilant about some of the things that you're dealing with. And so all the family issues, or maybe you've got family away, mom and dad who are aging, who have some health issues. And so you're concerned about them and what they may be dealing with. And you wish you could travel and get there. But, you know, because of the current landscape, that's making it extremely difficult. Health, obviously, trying to safeguard our own health and the health of the health and well-being of the ones inside our house. And then on top of all that, it's that time of year now where we're thinking about going back to school and what that looks like. And if you've got kids like mine who are involved in either extracurricular activities with school, or they're involved in some other type of extracurricular activity on the side, you know, whether it's a Little League association, Little League sport or something like that, then, you know, you're obviously concerned about their involvement and being around a huge pack of other kids and the exposure risk that comes with that. And should you allow, you know, your child to go to that and engage in something they love to do, but, you know, there's heavy risk involved. And so you have those mix of emotions, because if you say no, you really hate to break your child's heart, because it's an activity, it's a place where they just absolutely love to go. They have friends there. And so, you know, you're caught in that mix of emotions about, should I allow them to do that? I really don't want to break their heart and say no. But at the same time, what kind of parent am I if I let them go and knowing that there's an elevated risk? And so you don't know which way to go, and it's just that swirl of conflict inside you that really kind of eats at you. So so that really leads you kind of to this, you know, maybe you've had that breaking point where you finally say this to yourself, you know what, I just can't deal with this, or I just can't deal with this anymore. It seems like we're all kind of reaching that point rather quickly. But that's what we're talking about tonight, about, you know, developing that mindset, developing some strategies for grit and resilience. How can you keep hanging on when you feel like you can't hang on anymore? So if you're a bottom line person like me, here's kind of the bottom line. Here's what we mean by grit tonight. So here's our working definition. Grit is simply this. It's the passion and perseverance to overcome adversity or to achieve a long-term goal. It's simply that. But remember this, if it's easy, it's not going to make you gritty. You have to go through tough things in order for you to develop grit. And the good thing, though, is that grit is just like a skill. It's just like anything else that you've ever done in your life. So if you grew up playing sports, or if you grew up playing an instrument, you know just as well as I do that the only way you can get better at that sport or at playing that musical instrument is to practice. That's the only way you're going to get better. Grit is the exact same way. There are things that you can do on a very frequent basis to help strengthen that grit muscle. But remember, if things are easy and it doesn't challenge you, it will not make you gritty. Grit insists, and grit will demand that you pay a price. It will be tough. But if you do it frequently enough and consistently enough, you can develop grit and resilience to get through adversity. But the bottom line tonight is this: talent and resources alone absolutely do not make you gritty. It's not about you have to be super talented or super smart or super resourced. That's not about helping you be gritty. Grit simply is a mindset. That's what it is. Grit is simply a mindset. And to illustrate this point, I want you to think about there's a clock right over your head. It's on the ceiling of your room, just straight overhead. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate something, and then I'm going to ask you to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to, in just a second, I want you to look up at that clock. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your right hand, or whichever hand is dominant, I want you to point at that clock. And so you're going to look straight up at that clock, and what I want you to do is I want you to trace that clock clockwise, round and round and round and round. And then what I want you to do is, without bending your hand, without bending at the wrist, I want you to bring your hand all the way down to waist height. Okay? All right, so let's do that. So I want you to look straight up, boom, there's that clock. Please don't imagine it's a digital clock, because that kills this exercise. So look directly up, you see a face of a clock, take that right hand, let's point straight up at that face of the clock, and let's start tracing it clockwise. Don't stop. And now, without bending at the wrist, bring your hand, keeping that finger pointed up the whole time, bring your hand all the way down to waist height. Now look down at your hand. Which way is it moving? It should be moving counterclockwise now. And if I had a soundtrack that I could play along in this presentation, that would be like the Twilight Zone music that I would play. So let's think about that. We started off tracing the clock clockwise, right? At any time to ask you to stop and change the motion? No. But what did change? Your perspective. That's right. How you viewed at it changed. How you viewed at it changed. And because you viewed it differently, you now had a different perspective of the direction of the motion, even though the direction itself never changed. Your hand never changed direction. It always moved in the exact same direction as before. It's just that you viewed it differently. And because you viewed it differently, you had a different opinion about the direction of the motion. So grit is the same way. It all depends. And in fact, this is probably the biggest difference for you and I, the biggest difference about our ability to be gritty and to have some resilience. It all comes down to our perspective, how we are viewing ourselves dealing with adversity. So tonight I want to give you a couple of strategies real quick. Here are 6 things that you can do, mom and dad. Here are 6 things you can do during this next few months of the school year. When things are going to be tough, things are challenging, and it's anxiety producing, here are 6 things that you can hold on to, 6 things that you can practice to develop your resiliency. Number 1 is simply embrace change. Embrace the fact that things change, and things change quickly. I love this quote from Max Free. Says, we cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are. And in fact, you can even say this, we cannot go where we need to go by remaining where we are. And so we have to change. We have to change. So remember these. Here's a little stroll down memory lane. Remember when peanut butter came in glass jars? Or when there's the pull tabs off the Coke cans, and you pulled them off, and either maybe you made one of them into like a promise ring, you gave that to somebody, or you put them like a necklace, you wore those. Or remember the Polaroids, and you'd shake it and blow on it, and you'd wait that 30 seconds or a minute for that thing to come back. And those things actually are kind of retro now. They're kind of making a comeback. Or you remember the cradle telephones. You remember those, right? That's kind of funny now, because now those last 2 items, those now are kind of combined together, right? But all those things were very, very common, and all the companies that made those, were very successful. However, all those things have changed, right? All those things have changed. Peanut butter is not come in glass jars, they're plastic now, so that when we drop them, they don't break. And we still have Coke cans, but we've changed the way we open them. And we still have cameras, we still have phones, but we've combined those 2 now together. But nothing stays the same. In fact, because we learn new things, because there's advances in technology, there's advances in society and in culture, we're able to advance and to change. Nothing stays the same. We always change and can adapt and move forward. So here's the current story that you're all familiar with, and that was the great example of Netflix and Blockbuster. They started out, Blockbuster was definitely the movie, the Starbucks of movie rentals back in the 90s. Netflix came along and they actually pitched their idea. Remember when Netflix first started, it was you had to order the DVDs through the mail. That was how they were delivered. And Netflix actually went to Blockbuster and actually pitched the idea to the Blockbuster owners in New York City and said, hey, this is a way in which we think that you can expand your reach of movies. And they can order your stuff through the mail. They don't have to get in their car and drive all the way to a store and go in and kind of shop around stuff. They can actually order the stuff from their house. And Blockbuster, the CEOs, they basically just laughed Netflix out of the room. So Netflix went out on their own and started their own business model, their own practice, their own company. And then all of a sudden, they're operating side by side. And then here comes along digital. One company decided to go ahead and resist the change, and they stayed with their current model. The other one decided to go, you know what, we're going to go that way. That's the new norm, and we're going to go that way. And you know how it ends. Blockbuster is gone, and now Netflix is basically on every TV in every house. So we need to embrace the change. So embrace change. Remember, resilient people will understand three things about change. That change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Change is also very healthy. It actually produces new ideas. It produces innovation. It helps us become actually even more successful. And change is actually necessary. If you're going to grow, you have to change. It's absolutely critical. So number one is we need to embrace change. Here's the other one. If you're like me, you've been experiencing all the stuff, all the challenges with the coronavirus and dealing with kids in the house all the time now and not able to go very many places and do much, and all the stress, anxiety that you're feeling, you're starting to really become aware of that. So you know that your stress level, your anxiety level has gone up. It's probably impacting your eating and your sleeping habits. So when you're stressed out and you're anxious and you're worried, you can't sleep well at night because your mind is constantly going. It also might impact your ability to eat. You don't really want to eat a whole lot because on a full stomach, if you're stressed and anxious, it can kind of create some digestive problems. If you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping well, you're probably tired. You're fatigued during the day. You just don't have much energy anymore. And because you're tired and you're fatigued, you're not really you're just not yourself during the day. You have some mood swings. You tend to be more reactionary to things. Things kind of set you off a little bit quicker than they usually do. And because of that, you're doing some poor decision making. You're not thinking things through because your emotions are afraid. They're right there at the surface. You're tired. You're hungry. You're fatigued. All this kind of stuff. You're constantly in a state of stress and anxiety about trying to keep your kids safe and about what to do and all these decisions that are pending and looming. You're really not sure what the correct or what the best choice is. And so you're starting to become really punchy and edgy and you're making poor decisions. And because of all that, you start feeling like this sense of hopelessness and inadequacy. Like you're not really sure because I don't know what the right decision is and kids are looking at me and mom and dad are always supposed to know and always supposed to have the right answer. And you feel bad because you're not really sure what that is. Maybe for the first time in your life, you're really completely unsure of what the right and what the best choice is. And you feel inadequate to the current circumstance. So that leads to practice to number two. Tip number two for grit and resilience is you need to practice self-care. And there's really 4 elements to that. Number one is you need to have constant movement. You need to incorporate some exercise, some daily movement in your life. Now, I know that kind of sounds tough, and especially if you've got young kids in the house who are kind of need a little bit more attention, a little bit more vigilance and stuff. Sometimes finding that time to get out and exercise can be tough. But if you can take them for a walk, it's just something to incorporate movement in your daily routine is very helpful. Number 2 is obviously you need to eat right. We need to make sure we're getting our daily allotment of recommended doses of our vitamins and fruits and minerals and vegetables, all the stuff about, everything about eating well and being careful about the number of carbs that we're eating and stuff. So we need to make sure we're eating well and having proper nutrition. Number 3 is making sure we're obviously getting enough rest at night. Are we getting enough sleep? Are we getting enough sleep? And we need that. Our body needs rest. And then lastly, if you can find that time for just a little bit of solitude, some of that, just that quiet moment, whether it's, 15, 20 minutes, if it's a bath, by yourself, away from the kids, where you can just kind of decompress and have a quiet moment to yourself. That's something that is kind of important, and I try to offer my wife. So again, when I'm at work here in the house, as soon as my work day ends, that's the first thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to go, not to the bath, but the first thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to my wife and ask her, hey, what can I do to help? And oftentimes it's, hey, I need 20 minutes away from the kids, because even though she's working, both of our kids, both of our girls, they want to be around their mom, not really around dad. And I'm okay with that, because there's just something about mom that's just being in mom's presence is just so much more reassuring. I mean, dad's okay. Dad's fine for like, some fun moments and some, kind of play moments and stuff. But if I need to feel emotionally secure, when I need to feel safe, there's just nothing like the presence of mom. And so our kids are constantly around their mom, because they're anxious, and just like you heard earlier, they're not exactly sure about how to express it, but one of them is their presence. They need to be in your presence an awful lot more, because they find your presence like an anchor. It's more reassuring, it's stable. And so one of the things that my wife is, you know what, they've been around me since I got up, and I need 20 minutes alone. And so she'll go and take like a nice bath and stuff, and she calls that her carnival cruise. And so she'll go on a carnival cruise for about 20, 30 minutes, and I entertain the kids and keep them away. And so she can kind of decompress and just relax and have a moment of sanity for herself. And so it's another practice of self-care. Another strategy for you tonight is what we call create distance. Create distance. Now, sometimes it may be a little bit hard to do this right now in our present circumstance, because this really has two meanings. Number one is create distance. Sometimes the thing that's really being incredibly adverse for you, sometimes you just need to step back from it a little bit. And that means an actual physical separation. But the other thing that we're talking about create distance is you need to create some mental and emotional distance. Create some mental and emotional distance so you can add some objectivity. To your present circumstance. Here's what I'm talking about. It's how we engage in self-talk. For instance, you and I, when we engage in self-talk, our tendency is to talk to ourselves in the first person, right? And because of that, we are tempted to say things to ourselves that we would never, ever, ever say to a family member or someone we love, someone we care about. We actually tend to be much more optimistic when we're talking to other people. But when we talk to ourselves, the temptation is to talk to ourselves much more negatively, much more pessimistically. I'll give you an example. Here we go. Let's look at this. If I talk to ourselves in the first person, if I engage in self-talk, here's what I'm likely to say. I'm horrible at helping my kids learn from home. I hate it when they ask me to help them navigate through Zoom calls and Google Classroom accounts and other learning websites that the teachers want them to go to. I can't even remember my own passwords, and I suck at technology. And don't even get me started about helping them with their math. I can barely add and subtract. I feel so inadequate. My kids are going to fall behind the school year, and it's going to be all my fault. That's what we would say. Usually the temptation when we talk to ourselves in the first person is something like that. But here's the strategy. If we can flip that around and actually talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a family member or a very dear friend, we would say something different. So the strategy is talk to ourselves in the third person. Engage in self-talk, but do it in the third person. And when we do that, it's going to look a lot different. All right, Scott, breathe. Hey, if you can pay bills online, you can customize your iPhone, then you can handle this. It's not a competition to get it fast, so just relax, take your time with the kids, make a game out of it. Once they get the handle of it, they'll need you even less, Scott. Okay? And so, again, and there's plenty of tools out there that will help them with your math. Your kids are definitely not going to get left behind. In fact, your kids may even thrive in this type of learning environment. Those are things that we would kind of need to say to ourselves. So again, that creates a little bit more objectivity, and it actually brings into the equation a little bit more optimism instead of being pessimistic and negative. And all that does is feed and exacerbate that anxiety and that worry. But if we can stop, tap the brakes, talk to ourselves in the third person, add some objectivity and even some optimism into that, it can stop that negativity and feeding that anxiety and worry. So engaging in third person self-talk is a great way to create some of that distance from the trigger and the adversity. Another one is this, is lean on your signature strengths. Lean on your signature strengths. And I think Terri mentioned this one earlier as well. So when you lean on your signature strengths, it's leaning on the things that you do really, really well. And she, gave that advice, for your kids to help them kind of be, develop some resilience in getting through this and get in touch with the things that they do really, really well and that they enjoy. But the same is true for you, mom and dad. Lean on your strengths, the things that you do really well. And here's the other thing. What is also a signature strength, and we talk about signature, everybody's got, kind of like a very unique handwriting, and so your strengths are also unique to you. But we're not just also talking about the things that you can do really, really well. There are also things that you just enjoy, the things that just invigorate you, that you find just, I love it when I do this. Those are the things that you kind of need to lean on and do more often. In fact, this is recent research that just came out of the Mayo Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic said if you can do two of your signature strengths every week, burnout goes down and resilience goes up. And so one of the examples is, so my wife loves to bake. She loves the creativity that takes place in the kitchen. She loves to bake. It also makes it almost impossible for me to lose weight, but she loves to bake. And that's one of the things that she finds that just invigorates her. And it helps her kind of release some of that stress and some of that anxiety. So that's one of the things that she does. In fact, she's doing a lot of that now in the age of COVID. But that's one of the signature strengths that invigorates her, and it helps her cope with adversity. So lean on your signature strengths. The next and last one is this, is use the gift of humor. Use the gift of humor. And this is actually one of my favorites. So I love this one. So using the gift of humor. What we're really talking about here is, as we talk about the gift of humor, I'm going to give you three humor habits to start incorporating. And so one of the things about humor is that you do need to get the mindset right. And that is that you need to know the difference between the bummers and the woohoos. So what I'd like for you to do is to minimize the bummers. These are the things that we don't like, the things that don't go well. Stuck inside the house, today, bummer. We acknowledge the bummers. We don't ignore them. We don't gloss over them. We don't kind of, try to pretend they're not there. We acknowledge them. We just kind of do a quick, bummer. And then we move on. Those are bummers. But then we want to celebrate every single thing that goes well. Every single thing that goes well during the day. Large, small, silly, serious, trivial, doesn't matter. Those are woohoo moments. And so what we want to do at the end of the day is we want to have more woohoos than bummers. More woohoos than bummers. So with that mindset in mind, I want to give you three humor habits to incorporate, because we all know about the saying, laughter is the best medicine. It just does wonders for us. It has a chemical reaction. It releases endorphins and stuff that helps us fight off infection. It raises our spirits. So we need to incorporate humor as a strategy for resilience. So I'm going to give you three humor habits to develop. Number one, surround yourself with funny. Surround yourself with funny. And I'll talk about funny people or funny looking things, but surround yourself on a daily basis with the things that you find funny, the things that really make you laugh. So for instance, here are mine. So one of the things that my wife and I do almost on a daily basis is we will trade and we will send each other some funny memes. Here's one. I laughed for days when I saw this one. Bring me another Smurf. I love that one. It's hysterical. Another one is that when I travel an awful lot to do public speaking, I'll take, I'll listen to some of the podcasts and some of the recordings of some of my favorite comedians. And so when I travel a lot, I'll always listen to Gabriel Iglesias, also known as Fluffy. Yes. And so he just makes me laugh. Another one's Lewis Black. He's pretty irreverent, but there's something about his delivery that just I find hysterical. So surround yourself with things that make you laugh on a daily basis. Humor habit number two, look for the everyday humor. There is everyday humor everywhere. I'll give you some examples. Here's one. I want to go to the interstate, but apparently I can't go that way. Here's another one. Antique tables made daily. That's right, made daily. I don't think they understand the definition of antique. And then here's one that my oldest daughter saw. She captured this one, took a picture of it. We were on vacation in Colorado a couple years ago, and here it is. Go away. I love that one. there is everyday humor everywhere around you. And so we need to be looking for the things that make us laugh on a daily basis. There's everyday humor out there. The last humor habit that I want to give you tonight is laugh at yourself. Laugh at yourself. This is a tough one. In fact, this was actually the hardest one for me to grab onto, to actually embrace. I've always paid a lip service about, yeah, you always need to laugh at yourself, not take yourself too seriously. But come on. For a lot of us out there, can be a tough one. It can be a tough one. So the first time that I ever actually opened my eyes to the need to not take myself seriously and to just laugh, even in a very tense and stressful moment, was when my wife and I first got engaged. So my wife and I had been dating. We were in law school together. I popped the question. She said yes. And so we're very, very excited. And so we decided that we were going to we flipped a coin, and she won. So we had to tell her parents first. And so we were driving. We lived in Dallas at the time, and so we were driving to Plano, right up Central Expressway, Central State Highway 75, to go pick up David and Trish, her parents. And we told them, hey, we're going to take y'all out to dinner, and then we were going to pop share the news with them. Now, here's the deal. I was incredibly nervous and anxious about this because my wife came from a very, very traditional and conservative family, and I did not ask for permission from David to marry his oldest daughter and his oldest child. I did not ask. And so I thought, hey, look, man, I'm over 21, and she loves me, I love her, and we want to get married, then we're going to get married, and I don't really need your permission. And so the other thing that made me nervous is that David was also a gun owner. So I was a little bit apprehensive about his reaction to the fact that I did not have the conversation with him and did not ask for permission. So I was incredibly nervous about this. So we drive up to their house and pick them up. We're getting in the car. David offers to drive. So I'm like, woohoo! So I don't have to drive. And so we're on our way to On the Border. It was their favorite Tex-Mex place. And so we're driving down Central Expressway, 6-lane highway, all that kind of stuff. And we pass this sign. And you see the large word right there on the black billboard, pianos. We're driving down the highway. I look out the passenger side window. I'm in the front seat with David, and my wife Gina's in the back seat with her mom. We're driving down the highway. I look out. I see that sign, and I say these words, pianos. I wonder what that is. That sounds like an Italian restaurant. And as soon as, and this is a true story, as soon as those words slid out of my mouth, I realized what I had just said. And I did a quick look to see out of the corner of my eye if anybody else had heard what I said. And I could tell by the look on David's face that he had heard what I said, because his face was all like kind of contorted, almost like he was in pain, trying to make sense of what I had just said. And it wasn't making any sense. And this time I also realized that it had gotten completely quiet in the back seat. And so I realized now that both my wife Gina and her mother had also heard what I said, and they weren't saying anything. So I then feel all the blood drain out of my face. I started sweating. My palms got sweaty. I got nauseous because now I sound like an absolute moron to them, and I'm about to marry their daughter. We get to the restaurant. I go hide in the bathroom, and I'm there for about 20 minutes. I completely overreacted. I get that. And after I've been there for about 20 minutes, there's this loud bang on the door, and I know who it is. And so I crack open the door about that far, and it's my fiance, it's Gina, and she's looking at me, she's scowling at me, and she says, "Get your butt out here right now." And I said, I'm not about to go back. I'm not about to go out there and have dinner with your mom and dad. Are you kidding me? They heard what I said. I can't even say the word piano. Okay? And they think I'm a moron, and I'm not about to go out there and tell them that I just asked you to marry me. And then that's when my wife said something that I'll never forget. And when she said it, I fell in love with her all over again. She looked at me right in the eye. The scowl immediately vanished, and she smiled. And she said, "Honey, that doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter. What are they going to think about me when I tell them I said yes?" So I realized then that I was definitely taking myself way too seriously, and I just needed to laugh it off and just roll with it. And so that is a true story. For the record, David was not upset when we told him that we got engaged. He was cool with it. But this story has lived in infamy. This was about 20 years ago. And so to this day, it is known in my wife's family, if you say anything stupid or moronic, it's called having a P&O's moment. And I usually hear it every Christmas when we're around her family. Somebody will do something or say something stupid, and everybody will look at me and go, ah, you remember what you said? Yeah, I remember, that was me. So humor habit number 3 is laugh at yourself. And the last strategy I want to share with you tonight is simply this, is nurture hope by practicing gratitude. I love that Terri mentioned that, because that is so true, so true. In fact, the research all indicates that if you really want to increase your level of happiness and resilience, it all comes down to you practicing and expressing your gratitude. Not just thinking about it and acknowledging it, but saying aloud the things that you are thankful for. And if they're people that you're thankful for, expressing the gratitude to them actually is what makes the huge difference. If you are routinely practicing gratitude in the midst of adversity, it actually increases your resiliency. All right, so as we wrap up, I'm going to move past that. And so the last thing I want to share with you tonight is this. This is the code of persistence. And I'd like for you, when I share these, I would just like for you to say these out loud. So this is a code of persistence as we engage into the new school year and all the unique challenges that's going to bring. Code of persistence. If you'll repeat these with me. Number 1, I will never give up for what is right for my family. Number 2, I will always believe things will work out for the best as long as I hang on to the end. Number 3, I will be courageous and undismayed in the face of uncertainty. I will respect the fact that all families make choices that are best for them. Number 5, I will adapt and overcome all temporary disappointments and setbacks. Number 6, I will give myself grace when I don't know what to do. Number 7, I will take comfort in the knowledge that I am not alone in this struggle. And then number 8, I will never surrender to my fatigue or despair. Hey, mom and dad, just remember that as we're practicing this grit and resilience, remember, embrace change, create some distance, practice some self-care, use that gift of humor, express your gratitude often, rely on your signature strengths. But above all else, please remember this one thing, that this is a season. And just like all seasons, it is not permanent, it is temporary. You and your family will get through this, and you and your family will be stronger and more resilient for it on the other side. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and attention tonight. It was a real honor to be with you tonight, and I wish you all the best for a wonderful school year with you and your kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I loved that ending. I took a picture of it, but unfortunately there's a reflection of like my background and myself in my monitor. So maybe you can share that slide with me and we can share that out. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So if anyone has any questions, we've had lots of commentary in the panel and the Q&A, but if you have any questions, we do have a couple minutes left that Ruth and Scott and Terri can help answer anything that's puzzling for you or anything that you want to get clarity on from anything they presented. I know it's a little bit easier if we could see everybody, but if you could type them into the question panel, that would be awesome. And if not, we can always, if y'all have any questions afterwards, we can shoot an email over to myself, or we will post on the Facebook page and you can pop your questions in there and we can always follow up. I think everybody's absorbing. I know I told Terri in a chat after she presented is that, you know, in my family, my husband and I will get on a kick and I'll do a bunch of reading or I'll attend an online session, parenting class, and we'll be good for a couple weeks. And then I said we fall off the wagon. So I don't know if that's true for other people,
That's
but
why you have to give yourself grace. Can't do it all.
I want to comment on that one because yes, we're all human, and that's why it's called practice, right? These things are a practice because we never stop falling off the wagon. There's no attainment of this. It's just practice. I just so appreciate this discussion tonight. I learned so many great strategies. Thank you.
Right, we had a question that came in that they really enjoyed all of the strategies, but felt that sometimes it can be a little bit difficult with younger children, 6 and under. And if you have any follow-up suggestions of possibly how to make it a little bit easier with the younger kids. I don't know if Ruth or Terri, if either of you guys have any comments to that. Ruth, you're on mute, just so you know.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I use, sorry. One thing I have used with some of my younger kiddos, or when my boys were younger, was letting them draw things instead of write things, and that sometimes helps. Like that iceberg worksheet that we worked on, you could draw what you feel, and it could be super just, you know, maybe they're using red because they're angry or things like that. And I think understanding too that for little ones, they don't always have the vocabulary and the development yet to express everything. So sometimes giving them more visual things to choose from. So like, you know, I think we've probably all seen those sheets with, you know, the happy face, the sad face, all the different faces, and letting them choose things like that to show you how they're feeling can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I also think for the little ones, taking lots of breaks is really good. So one thing we used in kindergarten, all grade levels actually, was a sensory bin or a break bin. And that's something you can make at home that's really easy, and fill it with things that you know your child will use to take a break, like little, you know, fidgets or colors or something, and even schedule that in and say, okay, when you finish this, you get to go to the break bin. So we saw so much success with that with our kiddos that had a tough time sitting still. They knew that was coming, they got their energy out, and they got back to it. So that's a suggestion for littles.
You know, one other thing, if it's okay, that I was just thinking, sometimes we've had a few kiddos that have come through our home that have been pretty, you know, like in the 4, 5, 6-year-old range. And they've amazed me sometimes that sometimes they have more depth and understanding than we might give them credit for. And so leaving room for them to express what they're thinking and feeling, sometimes they might surprise you. You know, not all kids are able to do that, and most kids aren't able to do that all the time. But you might try and see if your kiddo is able to express some things more than you're, I don't know, maybe used to. Sometimes I think when we give that space, they kind of rise to that.
Great. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Terri. Well, it looks like we had a great turnout, and if you want to catch anything that you missed, we are recording the session and we'll be publishing that on our Facebook page. And I don't know, Davina, maybe we can send out the link in one of the upcoming school communications as well. So I think that this will be great for anybody that couldn't get on tonight to be able to listen at their leisure. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I don't know if we want to. Bye.
Be safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.